Going to throw and a run, complete to the 25, to the 30. Lindsey Scott, 35-40. Lindsey Scott, 45-50, 45-40. Run, Lindsey, 25-20, 50, 10, 5. Lindsey Scott, Lindsey Scott, Lindsey Scott.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Dogs Down South. I'm your host, Ted Turner. We're here with Adam Fisher, The Fish. Welcome to Thursday Night Live, Dogs Down South. We are 16 days. Kirby Smart's number that he wore when he played for the Dogs. 16 days until Georgia versus Clemson. Man, we've been counting it down, Fish. We've been counting it down, man, and it's finally here. And it ain't here yet, but, man, every day it's like it's here. It's here. We were just talking a second ago, and we're like, all right, man, we got like this week, we got this next week, and then we got Pick'ems, man. And we know it's going to be it's getting close, man. It's getting exciting. How excited are you, Fish? Welcome back. You weren't here last week with me when I was solo dolo. Hope to get Mr. Bobby Rouse back next week as well, but how you been doing, Fish?
Good, man. When everybody's starting school, like I've got 4 that just started school that had to go back. Got 1 in high school, 1 in middle school, 1 in elementary, 2 in elementary.
Okay.
So it's been busy, but yeah, everything's kind of settling into a new routine now. And that's just what it was, having to get back in the swing of things after a couple of months off.
Yeah, man. Yeah, no, I get it, man. You got the whole recruiting class. You got the whole 2027 recruiting class coming our way, man. That's incredible, man. Welcome everybody on Facebook, YouTube. If you have not done so, go follow us on YouTube. Help us get to 1,000 followers, man. That'd be incredible. TikTok page will start getting hit a lot harder this week as we get back into playing time, and I don't really go on there a lot in the off season. There's enough content to try to find to keep the stuff running on this side of it because we're not full-time podcasters, so this is what we enjoy doing. So if you are joining on Facebook, YouTube, also 24 hours after this, you can find us on Apple Podcasts. Episode 22, this will be on Apple Podcasts. Let's hop right in, Fish, man. I previewed Auburn, Florida, and Tennessee last week. So the Volunteers, Auburn and Florida, and we're gonna finish it up this week with SEC preview. And the only 2 left are the 2 picks that a lot of sports writers, about 80-90% of sports writers out there, are saying Georgia, Texas in the SEC championship. So I figured why not preview Georgia, Texas last. But before we hop into that, kind of weird this year. So fall camp is still going. So we are wrapping up around Saturday. Scrimmage 2 will be done and in the books, and fall camp will wrap up. But college classes at Georgia started back today. So maybe yesterday or today they started back. So kind of a weird demeanor, right? Because like in the middle of fall camp now, players are grabbing books and heading back to class. But just want to kind of talk about like what Kirby is saying, some fall camp notables before we get to scrimmage 2. But first, let's hop in, Fish. So what has been some of the things that have kind of caught you from some fall camp stuff? Like I know you've been reading, probably you've been doing your own kind of homework stuff. Like what's been catching you about fall camp?
Well, yeah, Feinbaum is talking about nothing but football now. There's no more basketball, baseball. So I'm tuned into that. College Football Live is coming on every day. I mean, it's just right around the corner. But yeah, been hearing Kirby say some things, and I don't know about you, but our D-line is suffering right now. We've got a couple of guys that are really hurt. Warren Brinson is nursing an Achilles, and Jordan Hall is still dealing with the leg injury, so we're a little thin right there, and that kind of makes me a little nervous because we were already not really 100% comfortable there until we see how some of these young guys and that transfer from South Carolina is going to pan out. But he's about to get a lot of playing time, especially against Clemson week 1.
Yeah, McLeod. McLeod. Xavier McLeod?
Yeah, Xavier McLeod.
Yep. Yeah, so yeah, man. No, I agree. He the funny question was he said, I think there was a question at one of the news conferences, and they said, are you aware of the position group that you are lacking the most of as far as injury and depth? And he said, yes. And they said, would you like to tell us and brief us on what position group that is? And he said, no. So, so it was just kind of his demeanor, man. But here's the thing. Here's the good news about the D-line that I've heard. In the two press conferences that I've heard him talk about the defensive line, the good news is this. The good news is I'm seeing a lot of stuff going on off on the sideline. So he said that Warren Brinson was able to do some stuff. But for me, as you followed Kirby throughout his tenure with Georgia, he doesn't really release a lot of injury update type things, right? So when he says, and he's always very bare minimum. So when he says Warren McClendon, when he says Brinson's off to the side doing some things, it makes me think like, look, we're not out here just having him go 100% because we are still 16 days away from Clemson, and we still have plenty of time for Corson and the boys to get him right, as well as I've heard things about, and we even have some stuff injury-wise, but I've heard some things about, obviously, Jordan Hall. That could be a little bit longer maybe than Brinson, but I've heard good things about Stackhouse. I've heard good things about I've heard good things about Stackhouse. I've heard good things about McLeod. I keep wanting to say McClendon.
Yeah.
McLeod.
I know McClendon is such a Georgia name.
Yeah, and I've heard good things about Jamal Jarrett. I've heard he's getting better and better, and obviously there are other injury things. But yeah, I agree, man. The injury front on the D line has been the talk of the camp. What else are you hearing around camp that you've been noticing?
Well, just apparently Nate Frazier is a name that I'm kind of excited about. I read up on him today, and that dude is a track star.
Yeah.
I think he ran like a 10.3 in the 100 as a junior. And he's not only that, but he's strong. Like he's not a little bitty skinny kid out there like, Jameson Williams, like running, just sprinting. Right. That's all he can do. This guy might run you over too.
Right. Agree, man. I had it down here. You was good. We're thinking the same thing, man. You stole the headline. Biggest fall camp rumor. There's been a rumor, right? Everybody keeps talking about like, what's this rumor? Is it just coach talk, or is it real? But now some of these reporters are getting some time, like they're getting a couple minutes at the beginning, things of that nature to kind of view practice here and there. It's not wide open because it is camp still. It's not where they're going to have like that legitimate 15, 20-minute viewing session at the beginning that you'll get when, fall starts. But Nate Frazier has come up on a lot of name drops. And so you're right, man. Really fast, elusive kid. He was not here for spring. So the things Kirby has said was, listen, Nate Frazier is an incredible talent. He's very raw. Kirby said, what I'm seeing is this: we hand him the ball and he's just running and he is getting yards. And he's like, when we can get this guy to figure out what he's got in front of him, what kind of offensive line he's got in front of him, and how he can use that offensive line. Wow. Like what are we going to get? So, and, so Nate's behind as far as, as far as the playbook and as far as, prep and being with the team and stuff like that. But to hear his name being called out of everybody in the running back room right now at this time of year speaks leaps and bounds for the talent he is.
That's amazing. That's one of our deepest position groups.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. So that is definitely a topic me and both of you have been kind of eyeing. And we're going to hit this when we preview Georgia, because we get to spend a little time finally on Georgia. We've probably talked the most about the rest of the SEC that we're ever going to talk about. So hope everybody, if you want to know about the rest of the SEC and what we think about them, you need to go tune in to the last 7 episodes, because pretty much the rest of the shows are going to be centered around Georgia. I know a lot of people that have joined have, I get it. You don't want to hear about the other parts of the SEC, but when you turn your TV on and you start watching some of these teams and what we're going up against, you'll be happy to know kind of what to expect in some of those games. Right. But We will go in depth tonight with depth charts, what it looks like coming in, preview Georgia before we hit next week, where we look at an SEC preview of how do we think it's going to fall. And then we get into week 0 picks. And then week 1, we're here. It's Clemson. But also want to talk about, when we hit this a little bit, other injury report stuff. So we said Jordan Hall, we said Warren Brunson, but we also have, although, Kirby said that he looked a lot better the last couple of days, but small concerns about Jared Wilson at center, starting center this year. Obviously a very key position. A lot of hype coming out of spring for Jared. It's a big shoes to fill at the center position. But also I've heard some great things about Drew Bobo. As he's gotten a lot more reps. I'm hearing that, and he's a head coach's and a coach's kid, so I think time has helped Drew Bobo. Obviously he's got some DNA in him that says college football, with Mike Bobo being his dad. But here's another one, and I'll ask you about this. A lot of talk about Smile. So Smile Munden obviously he's been fielding a little bit of a foot injury, and it's been naggy, right, for a long time. So questions are still, do we see Smile, Georgia versus Clemson? It really hadn't come up since fall preview, like day 1 of fall camp. It hasn't really come up yet. He hasn't really hit any full stride in fall camp. And as we know, like maybe Kirby's waiting till week 1 to let him practice. But we know that if you don't practice, you don't play. And it has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with like some kind of like punishment. It's more of if you're not game ready the week of, it's going to be hard for you to be up to game speed. Right. So what are you hearing about Smile? Like, what do you think? This is a very naggy foot injury, Fish. Like, what are you hearing? What do you think is going to happen with Smile? Like, obviously we're really deep at linebacker, but it would be nice to have a guy with his background of 4-year starter. 3-year starter, but 4 years if you include the special team. But what are you hearing about Smile?
Foot injuries are so hard to heal, especially like we're coming up on crunch time. I mean, we're 15 days out, and this is when everybody needs to be practicing, getting ready, getting the unity, getting used to everybody else, playing together a lot, and if he can't be out there, he's going to be a little behind. But I think with his experience at the same time, I think he could plug and play.
Yeah.
He could just rest this injury, but also you got to look at his, his stamina is going to be affected if he can't go out there and run and practice, or at least do something. Right. And you got to stay off those foot injuries to heal him.
Right.
So, I think he's going to be, unfortunately, just a little behind, and I don't know how much action he'll see. He'll probably see some, but he'll probably be on a heavy rotation.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, he's not going to – he knows the defense. He knows the philosophy. I mean, C.J. Allen's going to be a guy that's in the middle of all that, obviously. I've heard a lot of really great things about Raylan Wilson. I've heard he's really turned up.
Number 5,
incredible
I love single-digit linebacker.
There you go. They're all they're not all single digits. But yeah, man. And, I'm hearing really great things about Raylan. Obviously, you look at Mikael Williams and how they're going to use him. A lot of exciting things. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. Injuries are happening all over. It's hard. Even Kirby said it. Like, if you tell me how you can go through fall practice without injuries and make it to game 1, I mean, year round, you're going to make a lot of money. So tell me who that person is and tell me who that team is. You're just not going to do it. And you can't just not hit. You can't just not practice at game speed, because then it's like, all right, we sat here and sandbagged and we have no injuries, but we have no experience. We have no readiness. When somebody gets hit day 1, which could be game 1, it's too late. Like it's too late right there. So what's going to hurt you worse, sitting there going, I hope we don't get hurt, or actually preparing like we need to prepare. And unfortunately, accidents happen. You can only take so many precautions. They're obviously everybody's wearing the new headgear. You can even see the NFL is allowing that headgear in the preseason games. What are they? You know what they're called?
I don't remember what they're called, but some dude for the Colts had one on the other day, and I saw it, and I thought I was watching like a cartoon for a second. His head was so big.
I'm just going to call it the giant beanbag. They're allowed to wear the giant bean bags, man. So that's interesting. So I mean, they're definitely doing the right things and playing it safe, but you can only do so much, right? But
right.
Speaking of that, let's hop in because if one thing is not for certain, the injury bug may be in the defensive line of Georgia, but we're going to preview Texas, and the bad news right out of camp for Texas is they're down 2 scholarship running backs, right? So only 3 scholarship backs right now are they fielding. So obviously the big news is CJ Baxter from Texas. So if you didn't know, we're going to transition. We're going to hop in and preview Texas and Georgia and finish this up for our SEC preview part 5. So CJ Baxter, 698 rushing yards, 9 touchdowns last year, out for the season. Whenever you hear, took him off the field, going to go with an MRI for the knee, it's always one of those, if they can't figure it out and the MRI's got to figure it out, it's usually what you think it is. So torn ACL, out for the season, feel bad for the guy. And then we have a freshman running back. I don't have his name, but from Texas, that just recently out with a torn Achilles. That's a tough injury to come back from, man.
That's a tough injury.
Tough injury to come back from. So down 2 running backs. But when you look at Texas, obviously they're picking Texas to win, well, at least be the second place or first place team in the SEC. So when you look at returning standouts, obviously you look at Quinn Ewers. You gotta include Arch Manning in there because nobody has. I mean, maybe we did last year, but no, I mean the year before last. Nobody has the ability to look at 2 quarterbacks they have on the roster and go, these 2 quarterbacks could both be starting at any university out there at a high level. And we're not talking we're not talking like Texas and like Duke. We're talking about Texas and Oklahoma. These 2 quarterbacks could be playing anywhere in the country. And so offensive tackle Kevin Banks Jr., defensive end Ethan Burke, and breakthrough players. These are the guys. They went out in the portal. They did some damage in the portal. Isaiah Bond transferred from Alabama. I'm sure Auburn fans know him very well. I was just watching the show with Hugh Freeze the other day, and they were asking him about that game and what he would do different in those last 31 seconds. And he said a lot. He said a whole lot, but it's just it's crazy. And then
hindsight's 2020.
Yeah, and then safety. The name that's coming up that I'm hearing that Sark is in love with is Michael Taffay, and he calls him he's a safety, and he calls him the professor. Very smart, safety-oriented guy. So you look at these, and these are people they've added. These came out of the portal. And so let's talk about some strengths that we think Texas has real quick. Fish, QB, O-line experience helps entering the SEC. What's the biggest thing you think is transition from the Big 12 to the SEC that's going to keep Texas from either succeeding or failing? Like where does the buck stop as far as talent with Texas? Where do you think they need to have immaculate talent at to compete in the SEC?
Well, their schedule is not awesome, but the competition level week to week is going to be different. And that's something that they're going to have to get used to. But they've got a squad. I mean, their offense was going to be kind of scary, actually, before CJ got hurt.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they were looking really, really, really good. Now that's a hole that they're going to have to fill. That's a big hole.
Right.
And that's going to put a little bit more pressure on Quinn and Isaiah, to step up, and the O-line to block for whoever they got back there. It's going to be running back by committee, I believe, first couple of weeks until they settle into something, unless they got another guy that I just don't know about. But yeah, that's huge. That's a big blow to the offense.
So you're thinking spotlight turns to really quickly to running back. You think that's a position that, if you don't have, I mean, heck, we saw it in Georgia last year, and it's not that Edwards and Milton and, we saw what they can do when we have a healthy, backfield. Towards the end of the year, we were pointing in the right direction. Yeah, we were pointing in the right direction. And so I definitely see that. I like that answer. I do think the same thing. I look at QB and O-line experience to be crucial, but I also know this. What could Carson Beck's numbers have looked like with a healthy backfield in the first 9 games last year?
Yeah.
I mean, so I look at
we're 70-30 passing, easy,
mm-hmm.
easy. I mean, our running stats last year weren't great; they were okay,
right?
But
right.
You know, they were behind most every other team that made it to the playoff.
Right.
Or were ranked in the top 10. So, you know, that's something that we definitely are going to improve on this year. Sorry, I know, wrong team, but just saying.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I agree, man. So you got to look at Quinn Ewers and you got to look at that offensive line and go, you know, how predictable they're going to be. I think Mike Bopa did an incredible job last year to have like a running back and a half at times out of the 4 he had to be able to create ways to get the ball to Brock, to create ways to get the ball to, you know, a lot of the playmakers that, in my opinion, like, I mean, it's crazy to see that Dylan Bell is actually like can play wide receiver this year, which is a great, like, he's great at that position. But Dylan Bell was depended on as RB2 last year, because it was either it was either Milton or Dejon, and then you had Dylan Bell or Cash Jones. So I agree with you. I think it's running back. I think there's a hole there, but I also can tell you that it's a different speed on defense when it comes to the secondary. And I know things are always bigger in Texas, but it's a different speed. You as a defense, you have to make lineup. You know, you have to check and make sure what's going on and moves and stunts, and athletes are quicker and they're smarter. And I mean, they're smarter. I mean, it's just the SEC, in my opinion, is the cream of the crop of college football. There's no doubt about that. So it's going to test their defense, right? And Texas is just playing in the Big 12, where, in my opinion, some weeks you get most weeks, you know, you get some offenses that are like they don't show up, and sometimes Texas. Yeah, if you looked at some of Texas games last year, they played down to their opponent a pretty good bit of times.
I mean,
yeah. What about so I have down here, you know, strengths. Obviously, Isaiah Bond was an incredible pickup. You know, you lose Worthy, you lose A.D. Mitchell, you bring in Isaiah Bond, but, you know, I know there's receivers around them, but, like, do you think losing Mitchell and Worthy and bringing in Isaiah Bond, like, do you feel like unless you brought in, I feel like when you looked at Worthy and Mitchell, the reason they had great years last year is because it's kind of like the year Missouri could have with Burton and Weiss. Like, we can't just look and go, oh, easy, like, we're good. If we only had Worthy, like, well, we see what's going to hide. He's always going to have a safety over top of him, right?
That's right.
I think that's what will happen with Bond this year. So I think in order for Bond to be great, and now they don't have an incredibly great, like, right now that we know of, because we got to see it first, right?
Yeah.
Like, on paper, is there going to be a running attack? So how effective can Isaiah Bond be? And I have that as a strength right now, but I actually made these notes before they had all these running back injuries, right?
Yeah.
The portal was good to him. I have that as a note down here. But, you know, if the receivers around Bond are not ready for the task, then they're gonna put a safety over top of Bond and call it a day. And they're not going to be able to run the ball. And Quinn Ewers is going to have a long year if he can't they can't run the ball. So let's look at questions. Do we think their culture can mesh with the portal? A lot of portal fills. And, you know, you heard Kirby say this the other day. You know, we're not really a portal team, so he's not really concerned about a lot of the portal issues as far as the culture and things like that. With the like, what do you think about Fish? Here's a question: like, what do you think about a team that's almost? I mean, they didn't do as much as Ole Miss, but maybe they're 30-70 as far as filling their holes with portal players, and now they're also hopping from the Big 12 to the SEC. Like, how does this affect them? Is it different for them with that, or you think portal? It's just like having, you know, freshmen on the roster getting used to playing football.
Yeah, I don't think that's what it is, because freshmen come in wide-eyed looking to make a name for themselves. These guys, most of them have already made a name for themselves, so they might have a little chip on their shoulder when they get to campus, and they may expect to be starting or get so-and-so amount of playing time, and, you know, that could cause conflict in the locker room. There could be some resentment, you know, looking at, you know, the guy to your left or the guy to your right because you think you're better than him, or you think you got recruited here or, you know, transferred here because you thought you were going to play, but then
the
guy who you're supposed to be playing in front of actually got so much better. because he was hungrier than you were, to make a name for himself. And, there's a lot of things that could go wrong, but there's also a lot that could go right. I mean, it all depends on how you manage it and how you talk to these guys and like how much homework you do when you're recruiting these guys, when you're looking for them in the portal, because character has a lot to do with their ability to mesh.
Right.
And, I like Sarkisian. Media days was actually the first time I'd ever actually sat down and listened to him talk.
Right.
And I like it.
He's got some off-field drama going on right now, though, man. He's getting a divorce from his wife.
Yeah, I know. But football is a great distraction. Just
it is, man. But
office.
This is a year where you hop into the SEC. Can you fight hopping into the SEC with a divorce with your wife? And I don't know. Believe me, like we're not Feinbaum, man. We're not trying to take people down on this show, but no. It is a distraction, right? But
it has to be.
Yeah.
It has to be a big distraction. That's right.
So, I mean, I agree with that. I thought it was really represented well. I think the mesh point starts to begin with if you can get some guys in there that's been there, done that, been in the weeds with everything, been in the the fire with everything, and how do they take that on and mesh with the leadership from the team that's there. You look at interior line. That's probably the experience drop off for Texas.
The D-line.
Yeah. And they lose. Did they lose too much? I mean, you look at Brooks, Robinson, Worthy, Mitchell, Whittingham, tight end. He's a very talented tight end. Murphy and Sweat in the middle of that line.
Yeah.
Like, I gotta see, what that looks like.
Yeah, I loved watching Texas's D-line last year. I like big guys that can move, man.
Yeah.
Like Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, Devontae Wyatt, they could all move.
Yeah.
And Texas's D-line last year reminded me a little bit of that 22 line that we had.
Yeah.
When Jordan Davis and Devontae Wyatt were starting on every game. Man. Oof.
Yeah, nasty. Sweat reminded me a lot of Jordan Davis. A lot. Now, Jordan Davis is a big guy, but if I haven't seen anything closest to Jordan Davis that could move, Sweat was definitely someone. They were awesome to watch. So you look at two teams that are picked to win the SEC that are both going through, one going through injuries and other going through attrition, right? So that'll be something to watch and keep a question mark on. And you look at is Ewers and these new wide receivers, can they mesh? Like you're gonna really get to see how much of a leader Quinn Ewers is. And we're gonna preview Georgia here in a second and talk about Carson. But you look at Carson and you hear things that are being talked about how he's stepping up and he's coaching in the gaps and he's coming alongside these young players. And last year it was like Carson trying to find himself. This year it's like Carson he's found himself and he's also trying to, they say that the comment is as a leader, you're not called to create followers. You're called to, create more leaders. And so he's doing that. Like he's filling in the voids. He's answering the questions so that these guys can go out there and know what they need to know to go out there and lead themselves on game days. And that's big, man. That's big for Carson because you didn't see that a lot last year. So, but you got to see, does that transfer to Ewers? Like, I don't know about you, but I've seen Ewers in situations last year and the year before that where, you've seen him in times where his back's against the wall and maybe he's grown a little bit this year, but I will tell you in previous years, he is a guy that can be a head case. He can kind of get, he's very, when it's low, and when it's high type thing. Right.
Yeah.
So that'll be a question mark. The big thing with Texas is no major coaching changes. And when you look at, some of you talked about the schedule, offense and defensive rank from last year and improvements that's needed. One thing I will tell you that is a huge thing, and this was from last year's stats, Fish. This is something that is very interesting. You look at stats from last year where defense passing, the secondary was allowing 254 yards average. They were passed on last year, which was ranked 113th in Division I college football. Now, that was with a line like Sweat and Murphy and a lot of those guys that constantly kept pressure on the quarterback.
Oh, their secondary let them down against Washington. That's the reason they lost that game. Penix ate them apart, man. I mean, he just ate him for lunch. Like he just It was ugly.
Right. So now you see, and this is why you got to keep an eye on it. So now you see, this is definitely an area that you got to go. Have they filled these voids on the defensive line? And if they haven't, and they have not filled these voids in the secondary, does this all of a sudden become a Texas team that nobody recognizes, right? And we're going to talk about it next week because, myself, you, hopefully Bobby Riles is back. We're going to talk about all our predictions for how it's going to land in the SEC. We're going to get everybody's take, right? And is really, I know we have Texas and Georgia down here because a lot of writers are saying Texas, Georgia, Texas, Georgia. Who do we have there? And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to give you a sneak peek in the next week. There's another team that I think could give them a run for their money for that second spot. I think Ole Miss has as potent of an offense and an improved defense to give them a run for their money with their schedule. And we're going to preview it next week. But you look at Ole Miss, and they're so similar, so similar. It's crazy, right? Because you look at Sark, you look at Kiffin. They both were OCs for Alabama, right? Yep. You look at a team like Ole Miss this year, who has shown that they have done some damage in getting the line back right. With Walter Nolan, they've gotten some people in those spots. You don't really know what Texas has got yet because they didn't go portal hopping as much as Lane did. The secondary gave them problems last year at Texas. The secondary gave them problems at Ole Miss last year. Really great quarterback at Ole Miss. Really great quarterback at Texas. Offensive line letdowns at times. Texas, better offensive line this year. Established backfield. You look at Quinshon Judkins. Obviously, he's not there this year because he was unhappy in how he fit into the offense. Well, guess what? You look at what is the running back room going to look like at Ole Miss? What is the running back room going to look like at Texas? They're very similar this year. Very similar.
Very. Yeah, they're almost mirror images of each other. I mean, when you lay it out like that.
Yeah.
I mean, you're right. Like they're very, very, very similar teams.
Correct. And the scariest thing about it is that they're two offensive coordinators that in the last 10 years have both been offensive coordinators from Nick Saban in Alabama.
And one a
crazy. Yes. And one a natty. Key games. Here's the thing about Texas. This is something that I didn't do, Fish, and I didn't give them the benefit of the doubt on this. They still don't have as hard of a schedule as some of the SEC teams. And next week, when we look at these schedules, when I started previewing them ahead of time to create notes for next week, the SEC schedules this year are a gauntlet. Regardless of who you are, they are a gauntlet. Some teams just got the shaft, dude. Like Florida. Yikes. God. They got the shaft, bro. But we talked about Texas, and the things that we didn't look at on Texas are these things. Number one, you forget that Texas has to go on the road to Ann Arbor week 2. Now, how does that affect the SEC? It doesn't. It doesn't. However, it affects the college football playoff. So, you look at Michigan, they've tried to stir up some scandal around Michigan again. We don't know a lot about Michigan. This is not a Big Ten show, but if we want to look at Michigan, there is still a lot of similarities to that national championship team this year, minus quarterback. Still a lot of talent on defense, a lot of talent on offense, and they got to go on the road, man. They got to go into the big house week 2. Obviously, there's you can probably guarantee game day is going to be there week 2. But then, Fish, I noticed, you got the Red River rivalry with Oklahoma, which we're going to talk. We're going to talk about Oklahoma because I've done some studying about Oklahoma. We're going to talk about them next week. But that's a neutral site game, right? That's in Dallas. You got Georgia at home. But then the tricky one is this: is Texas A&M who they're supposed to be? And in that rivalry game, they got to go to Kyle Field. There's 4 games right there that Texas, it's a toss-up for Texas. I still think Texas A&M and Texas presents, unless Elko and the boys just literally come out of the gate sucking it up, that's interesting right there, man. Georgia, Oklahoma is always going to be tricky because last year, Oklahoma wasn't supposed to win that game last year either, but they did. And then Michigan away, we all know, we don't really know with me. We never know. We always know we can talk about losing J.J. McCarthy, losing some of the line, but let's just be honest. Michigan has been built for the last 4 or 5 years, and for the last 50 years, they've been built around recruiting, easy to recruit in Ann Arbor, bounce back. It's not like there's not 4 and 5 star studs everywhere on that lineup.
Yeah.
So how it fits in, we'll see. But
That's
I
true.
think Texas is interesting. I think looking at them next week, I've got a little bit different perspective on them. Do I think their schedule is still incredibly easy compared to others? Yes. But I will tell you this, with the running back news, with the questions at the defensive line, did they get those spots replaced? And is the secondary going to be better this year, right? And are those receivers going to mesh with yours? Like, there's a lot of question marks for Texas. A lot more question marks, as in my opinion, than Georgia has. And they're sitting there as two teams that are predicted to go to the SEC championship. Disagree or agree?
I agree. We're going to find out everything we need to know about Texas when they go up to Ann Arbor. Because, I mean, Michigan is having its own QB battle as we speak. There's like 4 guys they got right now that it's a toss-up. They don't know. But you know what? J.J. McCarthy wasn't that great. He was a good leader, but he's not. He wasn't the guy like to take you to the promised land or, you know, to get you where you need to go. I mean, you don't go a whole game or a whole half just running the ball if your quarterback can sling it. If you got a guy back there that can throw the ball where you want it, whenever he wants it, he can put it into any window. You don't run the ball for a whole half. I don't care who you are. And you can't blame the Harbaugh not being there and that being the reason why they did that. I mean, J.J. McCarthy was not awesome. He was not great. So they could even improve a little bit at the QB position this year, I think, as far as Michigan goes. That's just my opinion. And looking at what I see about that QB battle they got going on, they got some guys. You know, that's why it's a toss-up. But, you know, still, like, we're going to find out a lot about Texas week 2.
I agree. And the difference is, I think, too, is you look at these two guys, you're right, it's deep. But the two guys they're really looking at, both of these guys from Michigan have something that in the last few years is not something they're used to. Don't get me wrong, McCarthy could run, but there's some elite speed.
That was his best thing.
But there's some elite speed at quarterback in this battle right now, Fish. I mean, we're talking if we're looking at EA Sports college football ratings, you know, McCarthy would have had like a 76, 78 speed.
Yeah.
These guys are, I mean, is it crazy that we're going off ratings like this? These guys have like 86, 87 speed, man. It's a click up, dude.
Yeah.
It's a click up, man.
Oh, yeah, big time. I mean, them boys did their homework on EA, except some guys are just ludicrous.
Yeah.
Like Dylan Raiola, man. Wow. For Oregon, that dude. Or Dylan Gabriel, sorry.
Dylan Gabriel.
Not Raiola. I've got him confused. But that dude is a monster. I played with Oregon. I played my son the other day.
Yeah.
And I might have let him win because he was Georgia and I was Oregon. But we're not talking that. We're not going to tell him. But, man, I could score whenever I wanted to.
Yeah.
Like, I could throw it or I could run it. Like, that dude's a cheat code. Like, I can't believe that.
Yeah.
It was nuts. Anyway,
good,
sorry
man.
about that.
No, you're good, man. So Texas, the question marks on Texas. So let's get into it, man. Let's use the final 20 or so we have left, man. And we get to Georgia. We get to preview Georgia. Get to look at all the analytics of Georgia football and just kind of talk some Georgia football tonight. And that bleeds in and leads into the rev up for the season. So obviously returning standouts, you know, you got Carson Beck returning at quarterback, additions of Trevor Etienne, which I should have said they're not returning from the Georgia lineup last year. But Trevor Etienne transfers in from Florida, looks to be, haven't heard much from him from camp, but you know what? You haven't heard much about Carson. You haven't heard much about Malachi. You hadn't heard much about, if that's maybe a good thing. That means they're just, you know, steady as they go type things going on.
Exactly.
Yeah. Michael Williams obviously looking to, you know, that hybrid look this year. The Kirby to use him as an outside linebacker and defensive end, depending on downs, and use him a little bit more. Obviously, Malachi Starks returning for what could be possibly his last year at Georgia as a junior. And then Tate Ratledge, who is going to hold down the veteran status of that offensive line coming back for his senior year. You look at possible breakthrough players, and Fish, I'll let you hop in on this because I made these notes, but obviously around Georgia football. But I got any running back could be a breakout player, dude.
Any running back.
Rod Robinson. I mean, I didn't even when we made these notes, I didn't even have Frazier, right?
Yeah, I know. I'm excited about Nate. I actually did some homework on him today, and once I saw the notes, and
yeah,
wow, I spent 30 minutes reading about him and his past and his high school days and everything. I mean, his numbers are ridiculous. And a 10-3 as a junior, 17 years old. You remember Greg Garth?
Yeah.
Like that's Greg Garth speed. Like that's nuts. Greg Garth was super fast. He ran a sub 11 100.
Let's hope the hands are better, but
yeah. Definitely.
Dude, imagine Greg looking at this podcast. Greg, love you, man. If you ever turn this podcast on, man, we love you, bro. I didn't mean that.
But no, man. All seriousness though, like, man, that kid's got a high upside. If he can just, I mean, if all else fails, just throw him and say toss right. Sweep left, just go out around the tackle, go off tackle, and just find a hole and hit it and go. If he's not remembering the play, simplify it for him. I mean, if we get down to the nitty gritty and, we suffer some attrition and some injuries, going along the way, because camp's not over.
Right.
Plus it's a long, long season now, especially if you have playoff aspirations.
Right.
Right. Which I don't hate. I love the long season. More games is more fun for me. Right. I love college football. It's great. But yeah.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot to do with him. We can do with him if we need it.
Yeah, and I don't like to think of it, man. We've been off season for too long, so I don't even want to think about like what is the end about. Like I don't want to think about that, bro. So, but yeah, man. So any running back as far as breakout. So I'm interested to see Branson cutting. He's in paths. I'm hoping we can see a little bit more sneak peek of this. This scrimmage too. Maybe Kirby gives us a little bit more notes. Kirby is like Saban in a lot of ways, where those practices, man, are locked down, bro. I mean, when you see spring, I don't know, fall practice scrimmage 2, you see like 13 seconds of headlines, and that's it, man. You're done. You're gonna see like a couple players like putting a helmet on, drinking some water, and that's about it. I hope you got your clip. But yeah, man, Branson, obviously Trevor, Rod Robinson, who we not talked a lot about, but Rod Robinson was an incredible addition last year before he got a little banged up. There's so many Chubb juniors. I mean, it could be Rod, it could be Branson. Although I've heard Branson, is a little bit, different. Obviously, he's a little leaner, little more muscular, but still, looks like Branson. But any of those guys. And then on defense, you look at some breakouts and, is KJ Bolden, like, is he, the question is he for real, right? Is he going to surpass what needs to be done to crack the starting lineup? And what I'm hearing out of fall camp is yes, Dan Jackson can offer some, I guess, senior leadership, and can offer some, like, I know where I'm going to be at the right time in the right spot. And I love Dan Jackson. Don't get me wrong. He's a damn good dog because he's been here. He's played his role for a long time. Here's my thing though. Can the athleticism of KJ Bolden, if he knows where he's supposed to be and what he's supposed to do, what does a secondary with KJ Bolden and Malachi Starks look like, man? Like, now there's got to be a reason. Here we go. You ready for this? We're fixing to kick off the season right here, Fish. Controversy number 1. There's got to be a reason that Kirby looks at Caleb Downs and goes, buddy, if you want to go to Ohio State, you go to Ohio State. I know what my cards look like, right? And we sent Caleb Downs packing. And a lot of Ohio State fans, I'm trying to purposely make some clips because these are going to be some nice TikTok clips. A lot of Ohio State fans said that Georgia never had a chance. Georgia never had a chance because they didn't want to have a chance. You want to come play for Georgia, Caleb Downs, the door is open. But if you don't, you can go. And that's kind of what happened. But what do you think, really quick, as we hit on this, Fish, like KJ Bolden, do you think I think we see him against Clemson, but do you think we see him run on the field as a starter, or you think we see him later in the game?
I think we see him get some PT. he'll be in the rotation. I don't think he's starting. Kirby's not gonna. Kirby will play freshman, but Kirby doesn't like to start freshmen. Kirby's more of a, you put in the work, you put in the time, you've been here this so many amount of time of years or, whatever. He's going to reward the loyalty or, the work with a shot. Just ask Stetson Bennett.
Yeah.
Okay? Just ask Stetson. There you go. You don't need to look any further than that because we had Brock Vandagriff and Carson Beck. Now, you look at me in the face and tell me that Stetson is looked like a more capable quarterback than Carson after what we saw Carson do last year when he had a shot.
Right.
He doesn't fit the mold, Kirby's not, you have to be this size to play this position. You have to be able to do this to play here. He's going to play, he's going to reward the work. So, I don't think he starts just off the rip. I think he'll work his way in, he'll be in the rotation. And if he is good enough and, does the job and can do it better than, the guy to his left or the guy to his right, then yeah, I definitely see him starting. But I know Kirby hates playing freshman quarterbacks. I just know he does. He just hates it.
Right. Right. I think, I've heard such good things, man. I've heard good things about KJ. I've heard Ellis is definitely cracking in there. He's going to be seen in the rotation. Joel Aguero, that's the guy to keep an eye on. Like man, if I'm just telling you, man, he's been too quiet, man. When you don't hear names, it's not because they're not performing. When you don't hear names, I have not heard Joel Aguero's name. So I'm telling you, man, watch out. That is a very important position for Georgia. It's produced NFL prospects the last 2 years for Georgia. Javon Bullard is going to be starting for Green Bay in about 3-4 weeks coming off that position. So
there's 3 dogs on that defense.
Exactly.
Devontae Wyatt. What was the linebacker's name?
Yeah, Quay Walker.
Quay Walker.
Yeah, man. So breakout. I'm liking what I'm hearing from the secondary. It was a spot where we talked about over the offseason was, can it happen? Can it happen? It's young. It's on a lot of people's is this going to be the year that, Georgia finally has to really experience some lows in the secondary? Listen, there's a reason, dude. Kirby is, the guy's a mastermind, man. What a year to bring in T-Rob, right? So now you got Muschamp, who was in the secondary last year. You got Kirby, who specializes in the secondary. You got T-Rob, who's coaching the secondary. Those guys are at an accelerated pace. And you got a year where NIL has opened it up to where more analysts can be on the field and help coach this year. So you better believe, Kirby's got the people where they're supposed to be because he knows where we got to be this year. He knows the schedule we're going to look at this year. So
that's right.
I personally love what I'm seeing hearing from the secondary. What I'm not hearing about the secondary is always crucial. I'm not hearing something I heard last year a lot about was, do you remember this last year, Fish, when it was all you heard was, we're not where we need to be on offense. We're not where we need to be on offense, right? And then we come out, game 1, 2, 3, and you're like, damn, son, if the offense ain't ready, I'm scared to know what the defense is going to look like. And guess what? Look at the defense, man. Now, granted, go back and you look and you go, yes, could we have stopped, defensive line was an opportunity last year. I get it. But man, there were players that were not on that field week 1, 2, and 3 on defense that were on that field, aka CJ Allen and some others last 3 weeks that were just sitting there drinking Gatorade week 1. And we looked strong. Agree?
Yeah, real strong. Yeah, D looked great towards the end of the season last year. Defense was not the problem. Defense isn't why we lost that game to Bama. That was just some offensive inexperience, I'll say. Big game jitters. Carson Beck didn't look like Carson Beck. That game, second half, especially that fourth quarter.
Right.
But that's all gone now. Carson is going to be able to handle the pressure. He's going to be able to handle the spotlight. Our offense is definitely not a problem this year at all.
Right. If you're just joining us, we are finally to the end of SEC Preview Part 5. We are on Georgia. We previewed Texas a little bit earlier. Welcome in, whether you're on Facebook, whether you're on YouTube, Dogs Down South. Make sure and drop a like and follow. Also, hop in the comments. Tell us you showed up tonight. Sorry, I'm going to get
my son's actually watching right now. Say hey to Brantley.
What's up, buddy? How are you, Brantley?
What's up, man?
What's up? What's up? Welcome. Strengths, man. Let's look at strengths and some questions. Let's hop through these real quick so we can get to depth chart. But offense, obviously, Carson Beck gets healthy backs, right? Man, what can Carson look like with healthy backs, right? You got Beck and the Bobo combo year 2. Man, like I was thinking the other night, I was like, what happens when Bobo gets to look at a play card that actually he goes, I can actually run the ball. Like I can run the ball here. You know, I don't have to get creative. You know, did you see it last year on first down? It was like, okay, we can't just line up and run it straight at him. So like Dylan Bell's going to have to catch this on a play action inside fake / wide receiver quick zone, you know, screen for us to get 3 yards to not make it 2nd and 10. It's just going to be a healthy strength for us this year, I think, regardless of if you're 1 through 5 backs. Strong O-line play. I'm really looking forward to seeing the O-line. There's, you know, it's basically what the second line, a lot of those guys were looking at last year. But Georgia does such a great job of rotation. They rotate 8, 9, 10 guys. So you look at the way we do our offensive line. Stacy Searles has done a great job. I was worried about Searles when he came back, but I think he's done a really good job. Did you hear that Matt Luke is actually going to be taking over? I think he's going to be coaching O-line at University of North Carolina with Mac Brown. Did you hear about that?
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, he's back in the game, man. Back in the game. You know what? Maybe though, it might not even be just O-line. It might be a coordinator spot. I need to check into that. Defenses, additions of Tavares Robinson, Dante Williams in the secondary, and then linebackers are elite. Obviously, Smile is banged up with his foot, but man, Justin Williams. I mean, there's guys that we haven't even called yet that are just. I mean, like I just got a feeling we're going to see some numbers this year. I'll tell you one that I saw today, who's got a new number this year that I'm hearing really great things about is number 10 changed his number, but Damon Wilson, I think is his name. He was a 5-star at Venice 2 years ago, and I heard he has put on some weight, and he is definitely showing out. Not to be confused with Darius Smith that transferred from Georgia to Missouri, who unfortunately is out for the season. Man, really,
I saw that.
Really hard times for that guy, man.
I saw that.
Really sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so coaching changes. Obviously, we talked about this. Tavares Robinson, defensive coordinator. He got the co-defensive coordinator tag. I did not know that. I did not know that him and Schumann are still co. And then secondary, Dante Williams. Stats that need to improve. I mean, Georgia had elite stats last year. Offense, if you could say it needed to improve, rushing was 20th, allowing 191 yards a game. I don't know, man.
Yep.
That's pretty dang good when you play in the SEC. Defense, offense, obviously is a spot for us improving running the ball because you look at all the injuries last year. And then defense, same thing, averaging 113 yards a game. But geez, man, you're in the SEC, right? Key games when we hop into this schedule. Key games. So obviously Clemson's a neutral site game. You got Alabama in Tuscaloosa. You got Texas in Texas. In Austin. Ole Miss at the Grove, and Tennessee at home. It's rough, man. It's a rough schedule. Yeah, that would have been. I mean, it's a nice slate. Some nice slate of home games for next year, but let's not get ahead of ourselves.
You got
right?
tickets. Woo.
Well, I might have tickets, man. I could probably get some. They're probably going to be selling like. If you're on top of the the Tate Center, bro, they're gonna be selling tickets on top of that building, man, just for the freaking dog walk. Like, look, you want to buy these tickets for the dog walk? $1,000.
Yeah, heck yeah.
Like what?
I do it to go sit on top of a building in the sun for a little bit.
It's gonna be wild, man. It's gonna be wild. Depth chart wise. So what do we think about this, Fish? So obviously, when you look at you look at quarterback. I think they said it's not really a battle for the second spot. I think Gunner is solidified as Georgia's QB2 this year. The big, I think, competition will be at who runs the scout team. He's QB3 this year. Is it Puglisi? Is it Jaden Rashada? but not enough to really be concerned about. One thing that you want to hop right in on, when you look at running backs, I think it's the same way. I think it's like, what do you do, man? Like when you look at, ETN, Robinson, Branson, Frazier, Chauncey, Cash. Did I miss? I mean, there's more, man. I'm missing people. I know I am.
Yeah, Nate Frazier's not even on the list.
Nate Frazier's not even on the list. I mean, it's deep, man. But here's the interesting thing is how I think groupings of these wide receivers will be very key, right? Yeah. Like if you can think about this, because this is what I was thinking about when I looked at X, Z, and Y. So you look at what the possibilities are. It looks like in their mind, Arian Smith has still been getting some talk that there's still a lot of trust in Arian Smith. Have you been hearing that a little bit?
Yeah, and I know this is just a game, but my man's got 98 speed on the game. I mean, he can fly. That's what he does.
How many times this year are we going to use EA Sports rankings on the week of scouting reports?
Listen,
like it's like coming in there like playing Alabama today, man. You got to watch out because Milrose got a 90 rating, 91 speed, and an 87 break tackle for a quarterback.
He might be the best. He might be the best running back on the game.
Exactly,
Jalen Milroe. He might be, because I've seen I watched some reels on Facebook and I see people playing with him and they're like, "Oh my God, this game is so broken." And then I see him juke 6 people one way, turn around, juke the other 5 the other way, and then high step from the 50.
Right, right.
I mean, it's nuts.
So wild, man. We're using those rankings, but my thing is like you look at that. Presumably, you look at Dom Lovett, who for all accounts this year is kind of going to be. I mean, we'll talk about it later, but we think that is Dom the go-to guy this year? Is he the sure-handed Brock Bowers / Ladd, guy? I think I'm going to be controversial here, but I don't think he is. I think this year you're going to see Carson looking at 86 a lot this year. In times where they need a catch, and times where they need to make a play, and make sure in the right spot at the right time. I think Dylan Bell is going to be a guy this year that's looked at in that role. Now, don't get me wrong, Dom will be looked at in that role, but I think
Dylan Bell is definitely a leader in that wide receiver room. I mean, he's going to get some. I mean, after last year, we saw what he can do and how gifted athletically that man is.
Yes.
Yeah, he's definitely going to be the number 1 this year.
Yeah. A lot of people are saying, though, the biggest thing about this wide receiver room is what are the combinations that can really put struggles to the defense? Because that's what I'm saying. Like when you look at the speed of Arian Smith mixed with a Dom Lovett, and then what if you slipped in an Anthony Evans in that spot there? You look at the speed on the field at that time, right?
Yep.
That creates extreme worries for a team that has to take on deep threats at 3 out of the 4, depending on how many you got on the field at that time. Let's just say a 3 wide set, right? That has an Oscar Delp or a Urasek in there somewhere with an ETN or possibly a third down back that's very elusive like an ETN. And then you mix in that kind of speed at the wide receiver position. And then let's just say you're going 4 wide and you throw in a Colby Young in there that's 6'5".
I was just about to say, we finally have a wide receiver over 6'2". Like, that's awesome to me because we haven't had an elite, tall, jump up over everybody receiver probably since AJ Green.
Yeah.
Like, not that I can remember.
Yeah.
And that's huge. That's a target for him down in the red zone, for Carson down in the red zone. That'll improve our red zone offense because our red zone offense was not good last year.
I agree. The combination of these receivers are what makes this really crazy looking. Because don't get me wrong, you show me Dylan Bell, Arian Smith, Dom Lovett. I'm telling you, mixed in with a Delp, a Urasek, and depending on how I have heard that Humphreys has made a little bit of a comeback in that room. He's finally had more time to kind of show what he can do. And so I've heard good things about, you look at that second line with Colby, Humphreys, and Anthony Evans. Heard good things about Anthony Evans. I love the depth of our wide receiver core. I think it's going to give some problems. I know that Michael Jackson Sr., you know, he's come in transfer portal. Tuggle, Sokovie White. If guys you didn't hear, Sokovie White, his charges got dropped. I don't know what everybody's going to say. They're going to be like, they always get dropped. Not necessarily.
Not rah-rah.
Right, not rah-rah. Do we want to talk about rah-rah? Yikes. That's even the crazier part. You insert rah-rah to this that we're losing, and this room is crazy already, right?
Yeah. Oh, it's nuts. Ridiculous.
So, yeah. And I mean, obviously, we can pick apart the offensive line. We know that 8, 9 of these players are going to rotate, but obviously, when you look at what could take the field against Clemson, right tackle Xavier Truss, we know how long he's been with the program and what he presents, as well as Tate Ratledge. If I'm Trevor Etienne and you showed me the right side of my offensive line, I'm looking at you going, I'm literally going home at night and going, Lord, the blessings that you have upon me right now.
Just follow Tate.
See Tate and Xavier Truss on the right side, and then you go in there and you look at somebody that's picked to be a breakout lineman of the year in the SEC, which is Dylan Fairchild, and Ernest Green on the left hand side. And Ernest Green, my friend, is a sophomore. He's a sophomore. Nuts to see the second layer of what's going on. We haven't even talked about Micah Morris, who I feel like was an extreme. You know, him and Monroe Freeling were game changers last year in the bowl game. You saw there. I don't know if you go back and watch the bowl game when we were running the ball the best against Florida State. You saw Freeling's jersey a lot in there, and you saw Micah Morris with some pancakes. And that guy's eating pancakes for the first couple of plays on the bench. And that's crazy, man. That's crazy. But yeah, so let's hop over really quick. I love to talk about Urasek. Urasek really quick. I've heard nothing but positive things about Urasek. I've heard that if he's
a baller.
Yeah, I just heard he came in and did all the right things. What are you hearing about Urasek, Fish?
Same. I mean, I know I use I'm sorry, but I throw him the ball.
You're going to NCAA, man.
I throw him the ball a lot, like a lot. If it ain't Delp, it's him. And actually, I go to my tight ends more often than I do my wideouts on that game because Delp is a freak. He's like Brock Bowers 2.0, maybe even a little taller. You know, maybe a little more size, like built more like a tight end. You know, not saying Brock was little, but he wasn't tall. He wasn't going up over people. You know, he was outrunning them or out juking them or, you know, out athleticizing them, if that's even a word.
Yeah.
But yeah, Urasek, man, I can't wait to see him out there. We run some 2 tight end sets. You know, even some 3 tight end sets when we get down inside the 10, you know, with Lucky, you know, Delp and Urasek out there. You know, that's none of those guys are shabby. Yeah. You know, all those guys can make plays. So tight end is another group that often gets overlooked, but if they can run block just a little bit, you know, we got one of the best tight end rooms, I think, in the SEC, if not the country.
I agree. We pretty much at some point in way have hit a lot of the defensive stuff. The one thing I do want to go to, we talked about the D line, we talked about our linebacking core. Names we didn't mention even. I know we talked about Damon Wilson. Jalen Walker, man, is a freak, man. The Javon Curse of the Georgia, you know, he's a freak, man. They used him anywhere from the star last year to outside linebacker to money to he's just a freak of an athlete, man. I really like Jalen. I've heard it pronounced 2 ways. I've heard Jalon and I've heard Jalen Walker, but I'm gonna go with Jalen Walker. But those guys, I mean, our linebacking core, man, is
LBU.
Studley, Chaz Chambliss. I mean, I've heard them say it at spring and fall that the offense hates Chaz the most. You know why? Because he knows every single play in the playbook on offense, and he knows exactly where he's supposed to be when the play's called.
I just the Lord just bless him a little more athletically, because his brain is where it needs to be. And if he was just a little bigger, if he hit the weight room hard this season, man, he could be poised to have a breakout year himself this year.
I mean, he does have a black belt or something like that in jiu-jitsu or something, right?
Oh, he'll take you down. He could tackle you. He just got to get to you first. And but he's in the right spot 90% of the time, if not even more than that. Like I watched him.
I'm not as intimidated by jiu-jitsu as I was before the Olympics because I watched it a little bit. It's not that intimidating, man.
Oh, yeah, you're right. But I've watched a lot of the Olympics. Oh my God, the Australian breakdancer. I won't say anything else. Wow.
I hate to see him go, man, but it's like towards the end of the Olympics, it's like, what are we doing? Like, what am I watching right now?
Yeah,
there's some sports that I don't know, man.
Once gymnastics and track and field were over, some of the events were just nuts. But ping pong is one of my favorite things to watch. How in the world did those people do that?
It's crazy. It's crazy, nuts. Man.
Sorry to go off on out of left field.
No, you're good, man. Hey, man, we are 16 days, man. Next week, next Thursday, same time, 7:30. We're usually hot on the mic. Maybe adding some additions to the room next week. But it gets real next week. We talk about SEC. We look at where we think each team in the SEC will land. We give a small sneak peek of Georgia Clemson, catch up on news of what's coming out of after the second scrimmage. And we'll be heavy into Clemson, Georgia prep. And then the following, and we get to pick some fish. We get to pick some week 0 games next week, man.
I'm picking Hawaii. Cool. Just want to go ahead and let you know. Hawaii is my week 0 team.
Who they play? Vanderbilt?
No, not this year. It's somebody lesser than Vanderbilt, if you can imagine that. I can't think of who it is. It's like Eastern Michigan.
Well, then I'm taking Hawaii too if they're lesser than
I got Hawaii.
Dude, we get to make some picks, man. Week 0 picks. Also going to preview a few SEC games that are outside, including Georgia, looking at LSU, USC. A lot of games, man. Texas A&M, Notre Dame. It's a good slate, man. It's a good slate. It's a good time right now to be a Georgia fan. The rev is up. Go get you some merch. Got this hat, man. Fanatics, man. Little Nike hat, man. Go get you one of these, man. These are nice.
I think I might.
Yeah, go get you one of these. They're nice. They fit nice too, man. So make sure that you are dropping a like, follow Facebook, YouTube. I'm going to be hitting some TikTok up this week, revving up Dogs Down South on all these areas. 24 hours from now, if you missed any of this show, you can go back and you can hit Dogs Down South on Apple Podcasts, which you see. Where's my finger going? Right up here, Apple Podcasts. There you go. Yep. All right. So, Fish, final thoughts, man. Final thoughts.
I never knew that holder was an actual position on special teams. We have it. It's on the depth chart. Like I was reading the depth chart earlier, and I see H, and I'm like, "What is H?" And then I see Carson Beck and Gunnar.
It's legit, dude.
And I was like, "Whoa!" Did not know that was an actual position.
Maybe Rudy could have got on the field quicker and maybe gotten.
Yeah, Dan Devine should have let that man get his time, man.
Holder, bro. Can he hold it?
I know.
He could have held it, bro.
Anything.
Now that I see this, man, Rudy could have lettered 4 years at holder.
Exactly. He dang sure could have. Just throw the man a bone. That's all they had to do.
He had the grit, man. Hey, thanks for joining everybody tonight. For myself, for Fish, all things Georgia football. We are 16 days, Georgia, Clemson. Hope you guys join us next week. And thanks for joining tonight on Dogs Down South. And remember, everybody, all things, go Dogs.
Go Dogs.